Good evening and welcome to Boychoir Banter. My name is Jason Alexander Holmes, and I'm the artistic director of the Cincinnati Boychoir. I'm joined by Steve Malloy, Tom Merrill, and Mbuso Glovu. Mbuso is joining us all the way from South Africa, and I want to tell you a little bit more about him because the Boychoir is doing one of his works. So Mbuso hails from, and please help me with the pronunciation, Madadeni, Newcastle, in KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa. Yes, right. Um, he is the son of Vuka Petros Glovu, who was a music lecturer, choir master, guitarist, and a singer. Mbuso spent all his school and university years singing in choirs, participating in gumboot and traditional dancing, as well as isikatamiya. Yes, good, right. Mbuso is sought after as a music director, clinician, adjudicator, producer, and is regarded as one of the best educators in traditional African choral and African indigenous music and dance. He is currently conducting and directing vocal and dance ensembles, choirs, bands, African drumming, and marimba ensembles. He has published and performed several works for choirs and stage productions locally and internationally. I should also mention that it is midnight in South Africa now. So a special thanks to Mbuso for spending your time with us this way.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Great. So this is the second in our series of conversations that we're calling Boychoir Banter. The first one was called A Performer's Life, and tonight we're discussing a composer's perspective. You can still find a performer's life on YouTube, and this will be on YouTube following this this production. Our goal is to spend time talking about those topics that we don't always dig into very deeply over the course of a regular season because we're ready, we're getting repertoire ready for the concert, and we feel like we don't have time. So hopefully this will stick and we'll continue to do things like this when we can be back together singing in kind of the regular fashion. So who is this conversation for? This is for anyone who's interested in what composers do, how they do it. I find this kind of conversation really valuable as a conductor, as someone who spends a lot of time interpreting the dots and ink blots and lines on paper. It's really nice to kind of get inside the mind of composers to see what were you really going for there, and how did you come to this? We also want this to be a very interactive conversation. You can use the YouTube comments for your questions as we go along. Katie McDonald, who's the Boychoir Executive Director, will sift through those questions and then feed them to me, and I'll in turn ask them of our panelists. So thank you again for joining us. Let's jump into the conversation. So I want to begin by having everyone just tell me a little bit about your work as a composer. And I have to say as a composer because all of our guests do 7,000 different things and are masters at 7,000 different things. So tell us a little bit about your work as a composer. We'll start with Tom.
Thanks, Jason. So I've always composed, but in the past 3 or 4 years, I've been particularly composing for my church choir because of necessity of budgets and other things. We've gone to a schedule where one Sunday in the week, only the women sing, one Sunday in the week, only the men sing. And if you know much about sacred choral literature, there's not a lot out there for single gender voices. So I feel like a little bit, I'm not as prodigious as Bach, but I've composed like 3 different lectionary cycles now. Like over 20 psalm settings and other things. And so for me, it's been a love. You know, I do it on the weekends because I have a full-time gig, but it's been really rewarding. And so far, nobody's thrown anything at me. So I think it's going okay.
That's always nice.
Yes.
You don't have to use like a pen name, right? Great. Mbuso, let's go to you. Tell us about your work as a composer.
It's for me, it's quite challenging because I work with a number of ensembles. So every now and then I have to prepare repertoires for different ensembles. And then I get approached by other directors and choir conductors. And then that's when it becomes a little bit hectic because sometimes you need to be inspired And even if you're not inspired, you need to find a way to be somehow technical in your approach so that you can deliver. So for me, my work it can be stressful. I can testify that it can be quite stressful, especially when there's work piling up and I'm not finding inspiration. And then, oh yeah, some can relate, but it's rewarding, as Tom has already mentioned. It's quite rewarding to see your work coming into something that is good. Sometimes you miss the sport, but sometimes it's beautiful. Thank you.
Sure. And Steve.
Um, it's interesting because I came to writing and arranging accidentally. I thought when I was young that I was going to be a musical theater singer actor. So my teachers thought, well, if you're going to do that, you need to learn how to play piano. And through piano and because I, ended up learning how to read music fairly well, I'd go audition for shows and I ended up being hired to play piano because that paid.
Yeah, that's a thing.
And then from there, I ended up writing smaller orchestrations. People would say, could you reduce this orchestration down to 5 horns or a synth or something? And I started writing that way and also writing for show choirs and other pop arrangements. And so all of a sudden I went from being a performer to being a musical director to being an arranger. And then I found that I really, really loved writing. That there was just this joy of being able to put something down on paper, because I still have quite a few of my handwritten manuscripts, and getting the people to play it and hopefully play it correctly. And so I've been now doing this for, oh my God, 30 years.
Oh, wow.
And,
Wow.
and still find joy, I'm sure everybody else will be kind of talking about publications and compositions. I just published a book with Oxford University Press, Popular Voice Works at Christmas, which is a collection of various originals and arrangements of different Christmas songs and carols, kind of in a pop jazz idiom.
Yeah. So actually, maybe let's go down that kind of rabbit hole of the things that we've published or the types of the work that we do. Buso, the Boychoir is really, really loving your piece Ngotando. It means only through love, and it's a really it's a wonderful piece for this global moment that we find ourselves in. At first, I chose this as a response to the pandemic. Like, we can work our way through this if we can love each other enough to, say, wear a mask. But then the unrest around the murder of Black people by the police happened in this country. And again, it was one of those things where this is the message. When we were talking before, I was telling you guys about how one of our boys described this piece as revolutionary, and what a concept that love can be revolutionary. So tell us a little bit more about your work, Mbuso, the types of things that you tend to publish.
Okay. Maybe let me start first by talking about Ngotando.
Yeah.
It's quite actually, the story behind Ngotando is very strange. Whenever I narrate the story, some people don't believe that I actually wrote the song during rehearsal. A friend of mine was going through some mental problems. He was unstable mentally. So during rehearsal, he suddenly stood up and said, I'm not feeling this rehearsal. It was very dramatic and shocking. And everyone looked at him with these eyes. What are you doing? And then some of the bigger guys tried to pick him up and take him out. And he was very close to me. And it was so heartbreaking. And as I was standing behind the piano, I just hit a chord, E minor chord. And then I started just doing the harmonies. And then because it was such a sad scene, in my heart, I thought, okay, of course I still love this guy, but how do we help him as a choir? And then in my heart, all I thought is, well, it's only through love that we can help him. And then whatever situation he may be going through now, we can conquer that situation. And then I thought, let's open up our hearts. And then as I was just, as those words were running into my mind, then I started playing, started singing the song. Then I said, sopranos, come, take this line, altos, take this line, tenors, and everything. And then it was a whole song. Um, Actually, that's exactly what happened many years ago.
Wow.
And then then it's a song that we just sang at rehearsal. We performed once, and then years passed, 5-6 years passed, and then but I knew it was a good song because there were people who always wanted the song.
Yeah.
As I was working with a lot of choirs, then it suddenly hit me in my life that I need to, at some point, just give my best, even if I don't have an ideal choir that can sing my songs, but let me just give to any choir that is ready to sing. And then I gave it to Tax Camerata, a choir that is directed by Michael Barrett. Actually, that's the choir that first made the song famous. So then I decided to give it to them, and then they loved the song, and then I started getting positive feedback from the song. But that's actually what happened with Go Tando, to be specific. And then,
Wow.
and then, as you were mentioning, Jason, that the message is relevant to what the whole world is going through, and I can say that though it may sound a bit esoteric, but our gifts are for the world. The songs that we receive are for the world. So we might as well open up and share the music and let people hear how, let people relate with the pains of other people. Let people, those who have resources, bring the resources so that we build one another, because we are one human race at the end of the day. So that's what the song is about.
That's amazing to me. I love that. And that's one of the things that our boys are finding that they love about the song also, is that you can feel that kind of organic nature of the song in singing it and learning it. It's so weird. We were also talking before this about the whole virtual rehearsal thing and how it's kind of isolating, because you're used to singing with other people, and now all of a sudden it's just you and your voice. And God bless you if you're an alto, it's just you singing your Johnny one note. No, and even in that type of situation, we find that song to be very powerful. Steve or Tom, do either of you have stories about your compositions kind of being used to speak to a moment? And I know this was not on the list of questions, but this is where the conversation is. Let's go with it.
Yeah, and to be honest, I feel like I'm the little guy over here. I have two pieces published. One's on the academic side. It's a 17th century thing. And then my first actual published piece, but there's quite a story behind it. So I went to the wedding of one of my former students that I taught while I was at Xavier. And she was at that time conducting middle school girls, and they actually sang for her wedding. And I got to the wedding early, and I heard them doing warm-ups, and they were just working their warm-ups through, but I immediately recognized them as the warm-ups that I had been doing with my choirs that I was at Xavier, that I had actually learned from one of my professors. So there was suddenly this line, of history that was really touching. And then they didn't sing it, but one of the texts at their wedding was the Song of Solomon, the Rise Up My Love, my fair one, and come away, for lo, the winter is past. And I was so struck by that. And I was sitting there thinking, well, she has these girls and there's this text. And I thought, I got them a wedding gift, of course, but I thought, I'm gonna do an arrangement of this. I love the text. And so I wrote it, I sent it to her girls sang it. And then Dale Warland said, do you have, I know you've been composing, do you have anything? And I said, well, look at this piece, it has, here's the sort of the backstory behind it. And he gave it to Shermer, and they said yes, and the rest is history. So I have the copies here, and I think, because it meant so much to me, that there's that connection, there's that history, there's that feeling of connection. That was pretty powerful for me.
Awesome. And Steve, do you have a similar moment or a moment of inspiration that you can share with us?
Oh, sorry about that.
It's okay.
So I have been singing in the Gala Chorus Network. That's like a network of community choruses for gay, lesbian, bi, trans people since I was 23 years. No, 33 years. I need to stop saying that. But, you know, we would sing these pieces about Harvey Milk or about, now I can't think. But anyway, they were all pieces about white men. And I was thinking, when am I going to sing a piece about somebody who looks like me? And I saw this wonderful documentary called Brother Outsider about Bayard Rustin. If you don't know who Bayard Rustin is, he's mostly known for organizing the 1962-63 March on Washington, where Martin Luther King did his I Have a Dream speech. And it was Bayard who introduced Martin Luther King to the teachings of Gandhi and of, passive resistance. And I mean, if there was no Bayard Rustin, there would be no Martin Luther King. And he was Black and he was openly gay at a time when it was not cool to be openly gay. We're talking the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And, this was a man that, a young man like me could look up to. And I was wondering, why have I never heard of him? And so that was the impetus to finally find the right director and say, hey, I've been toying with this idea about writing a piece about Bayard Rustin. Would you be interested in helping me with it? And the director was James Ramsire Miller of One Voice Mixed Chorus. And we immediately jumped on the idea and brought some people in. It turned out to be this 45-minute, I call it a narrated choral work. A lot of people would call it a cantata, talking about the various things that he did and what he stood up for. And it's full of, it has the Black national anthem, it has protest songs, it has original pieces. And it just turned out to be this labor of love. And, it inspires me to this day. We just did a performance of it in Minneapolis in February, actually, where it was really cold. But you can find that on YouTube, Bayard Rustin, The Man Behind the Dream, and that was a piece that really for me came from the heart and from the soul, and it spoke to me, and I find it really speaks to the moment that we're living in right now. This was a man who worked on fighting for civil rights in the 60s, and it seems like we're in the same spot we were in 40, 50 years ago now.
Wow, those are really, really compelling stories. I think we don't, as performers and conductors, we don't often spend enough time like understanding how something came to be. And now, I feel like I could do any of the three pieces we just talked about and have like a wealth of knowledge and connection to them. So thank you all for sharing so openly about that. And Tom and Steve, I have spent some time in this quarantine time playing through the two pieces that you mentioned. So to be seen on a stage near you at some point when we can sing again. So awesome. So now let's get a little bit into the nitty gritty of like sitting down, pen and paper or, uh-oh. So weird sound in my microphone. Here we go. Okay. Sitting down with pen and paper or sitting down with, Finale or Sibelius or whatever you use. What is that process like? Mboso and Buso, you talked a little bit about, sometimes the inspiration is not there, but the commission is there. So you have to and Tom, I feel quite certain that like at some point in composing those liturgies, like there was some time where you were like, I don't know. So what does that process look like? Let's start with Steve.
For me, it all depends on what it is. Is it an original piece? Is this an arrangement? I mean, if it's an arrangement, I will have to say I kind of sing the melody through my head, find out what key and what choir it's going to be for. Is it for a mixed chorus? Is it for a tenor bass chorus? Hello there, kitty. Is it for, oh boy, forgive me if a cat starts to block the camera. Okay, bye-bye. Thank you, Mookie. Is it for a treble chorus? So, you know, finding the key isn't up, very important to me, to make sure that the range is going to sit right. And then I spend time with that, playing with it, trying to figure out if it's accompanied or not. If it's accompanied, trying to write a piano part that fits the style and also that's playable. I have been known for writing some rather hard piano parts, which I'm working on. I'm sorry, this cat. But if it's an original piece, I start, you know, I find a lyricist sometimes, or just take the lyrics that I already have, and figure out what the mood is, what is the piece trying to say, and what style will best fit it. There have been times when I have written 3 different versions of a piece to find what I'm really trying to keep. Tom, I think you understand, especially with writing liturgical stuff. Boy, okay. Thank you, Mookie. Everybody say hi and bye to Mookie. But yeah, and a lot of times I will start with pen and paper. And then as that idea develops, then I'll start working with Sibelius. Okay, I need to hold my cat for a moment.
Okay, go for it.
He seems to need some attention. But that's kind of how I start.
Cool.
Yeah, so I don't want to sound like I need help, but I really do hear voices in my brain, and when I read poetry, especially, the first thing I think is, gee, I wondered how I'd set that, and I'll hear a phrase and I'll immediately have a way that I think of, oh, it's like Steve just said, there are 3 different ways that you could say this thing, and what's the way that's gonna mean the most to me, that'll mean the most to you, that'll mean the most. So when you compose, it's really this funny thing, because you're writing for you, but you're really writing for somebody to perform it, but you're really writing for somebody to listen to it. And so there are all these things that you have to think about. It's like, well, how will they feel? And sometimes as a composer, you're writing for the performers, because there's stuff in the score that they can only see, that maybe it's how the lines interconnect, that maybe if the audience is really savvy musically, they'll pick up on that. But it's like the Germans used to call it Augenmusik, right? It's music that's, the score would look some way that only the people who were singing would get the joke. So I really hear things in my head. And then, I'll probably have a melody line completely worked out before I ever put it to paper. And when I say put it to paper, like Steve, I use Sibelius. And I have probably, 2 or 3 versions of everything that I've done, because I'm not sure. For me, they have to ferment, right? I'll put them away and take them back out and I go, oh, that's okay. Maybe if I do this. And so it's, sometimes it's inspiring and it's a one and done. And other times I have to think about it and let it dwell for a while.
Cool. Before we get to Mbuso, I'll pause a second. And we've been talking about Sibelius and Finale. Those are programs for computers that you can use to write music notation. So we had a little question that said, you talked about Sibelius. What is that? So thank you for asking.
And I should also mention both Sibelius and Finale, which I guess I haven't looked lately, but I think they're the main 2 that are out there. They both have free versions. So if you're interested in composing, I will say, even if it's free, there is a heavy lift. If you've never used composition software before, don't think it's easy, because it took me years to really learn how to use it effectively.
Yeah, one of my memories from studying theory in college was our first class being, this is how you turn in your work using this program, because otherwise we would all have been a mess. Mbuso, tell us a little bit about kind of what happens when you sit down to write something.
I'm going to sound like Tom. I also hear voices in my head. I also hear things in my head. Sometimes in the early hours of the morning, and then if Tom is laughing, and then sometimes I wake. Sometimes I wake up and then make sure that my phone is fully charged. And then I record some of these melodies, because sometimes they come and you think they're in your head, and then a few minutes later they're not there. And that works for original music. But now when you're commissioned, sometimes when you are asked to do something specific, then it's a little bit of a challenge, because that's where now you need to sit down and think about the choir, the skill levels, what can they do, and all of that. And since I specialize mostly in African music, there are choirs that cannot pronounce some African words and African languages very well. So you need to keep that in mind, make sure that the music is beautiful, but the text is simpler, depending whether it's primary school kids or high school, college, or university. Then you adjust your level of difficulty according to the group that you're doing it for. But I must say that it has to still sound authentic and sound right. It has to sound, how can I say, let other African music composers or any other professional musician listen to the song and say, this sounds like a good song. So you have to always strike that balance.
Yeah, I think especially most of the young people watching will be familiar with that process of writing a paper or an essay or something, and you always have to get someone else to look at it to make sure it makes sense, to make sure it sounds like you, it sounds like your voice. So I'm happy that you mentioned that. There's a question that's just come in, and I think we may have already answered it, but I'll say it out loud again anyway. Do you start by ear or at a keyboard, and does it start with just a blank sheet of staff paper? Like, and it seems like for most of you, it's kind of like all of the above. And but go ahead and take a stab at that question. Let's see. I'm trying to see who doesn't look as if they're looking off into space thinking first. So, Mbuso, how do you start?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I can't imagine starting on a sheet of paper. Sheet of paper. Well, for me, there has to be an instrument. There has to be an instrument next to me. You have to play what you're hearing first. And then it's good also to have a recording device while you do that, so that you can listen to the process later. But there has to be an instrument next to you, and play whatever that you are hearing. Because maybe if you start by holding a sheet of paper, that you need to be quite good in transcribing what you hear to do that. But the process is much quicker on an instrument. Preferably the piano, if you do it on guitar, but on any instrument, doesn't matter.
Cool. And what about you, Steve?
It's kind of a mixture of hearing it and singing it, and then writing it on paper. Most of the time, I'm sitting at my keyboard when I'm writing, just in case I'm not for sure of what a pitch or what key I'm in. I just kind of play a little bit and then write. I've been trying to write away from the keyboard, because sometimes I find for me, I start using the same chord progressions over and over. And I'm trying to get out of, I see you all shaking your head. So I'm trying to get out of that. And, sometimes I find something, rather funky, and it's okay. Change is good. But yeah, That's kind of what I do.
I get it. You kind of have to make yourself a little bit uncomfortable in order to come up with something new and exciting. Tom.
I'm sitting here thinking about this, and I think, 99% of the music I write is for choirs. And so I really spend a lot of time with the text before I ever do anything musically. I know there's stuff happening musically because I'm like batting away those annoying musical ideas that are coming out. Say, wait a minute. But I really want to spend some time with the text and sort of inwardly feel what it's saying, or what I think it's saying, or what I think I want it to say. And, sort of like I'll do not a literary analysis, but I'll underline words that I think are important and where I think phrases might be. And if it's poetry, I'll reformat it in a way that makes sense to me. And sometimes I'll do that 2 or 3 times until I'm happy with, what I see. And all along, those voices have been, suggesting different things. And then I'll start to, sometimes at the keyboard, I have a real piano upstairs. I have an electronic keyboard here by my computer. So it just depends sort of where the muse strikes me about how I'm producing the sound. Sometimes I produce it directly in Sibelius. It just depends.
Cool, I get that. So talking about the skills that you need to be a composer, watching or listening, what do they need to work on if something that they're interested in? Steve, what would you say? Maybe the skills that someone needs if they want to be a composer.
For me, it was the piano that launched me into the writing. As I tell people, I learned how to play the piano so I could learn how to sight read vocally, and which is a wonderful thing for any composer. But being able to sit at whatever instrument, whether it's a polyphonic instrument or just one voice, being able to play what you hear in your head, and that's skill 1 for me. And then 2, when you hear music that you like, if you can find the print music of it, so you can see exactly what they wrote. If there's a certain chord you like, go find that music or go write it out yourself. Learn how to lift with your ear. I've done a lot of that in my life. But I would say, learn an instrument, learn how to read music, unless you're planning on teaching everything by rote, which some people do. And also learn how to listen. Uh-oh, Jason, you're muted.
Thank you. Tom, what skills do you need?
Yeah, ditto to everything Steve said. I grew up actually not in a vocal world. I always sang in choirs, but in junior high school, college, I played trumpet. So if you watch me sight reading today, I am still fingering my part because it is what you learn, right? So if it's a tough chart, man, my 3 fingers here are playing my trumpet as I'm reading. I picked up a trumpet a few years ago and the sound was horrible. So oh well.
Your fingers still work, but your lips are like, what is happening?
Yeah, that's one thing. And I would say, my background is really traditional harmony. I have music degrees, did a theory cognate as part of my doctorate. And so, absolutely love the theory part of it. And, along the way took all the different species counterpoint. One thing that really made me a better composer, I think, was the work that I did in musicology. So I would take these works of dead composers and transcribe them. And just the fact of doing that and seeing how somebody else put music together. So I would, put these really intricate scores into Sibelius. You learn so much by seeing how other people write, and not just, looking at the music, but actually writing out the parts and taking the time to learn how, dead people. I don't mean that rudely, but people who have composed before. That's really, really instructive. And I've had I'll put these in parentheses, the joy of transcribing super early music, like the very beginnings of Polyphony, which if you looked at one of those scores, you'd be like, what the heck is that, right? But you just learn a ton by transcribing that stuff and figuring out how people did it back then and what that means to you today. Yeah, so.
And Mbuso, same question.
Oh, yes. Tom and Steve are actually right. You need to be able to play an instrument. Let me just add that you need to also learn to harmonize by ear, because it really helps in hearing voices as you put layers and layers of harmonies. So you need to be able to harmonize by ear. But let me just add also that for me, I only met music theory at the age of 21. So most of our African music is not transcribed. Just to put facts across, most of our music has not been transcribed. So one skill that I had to develop was to transcribe all the voices, all the rhythms by myself. And it took me through also a journey of discovering the complex rhythms in our music. That is why it's difficult for even other people to read it from the moment go. And to be honest with you, when I teach some of this music, I don't even look at the score, because some of these complex rhythms are just difficult to read. So I would say learn to harmonize by ear, and learn to, whatever that you hear, learn to put it down. And I can't overemphasize music theory. It's very, very important, especially for people who are like me, who don't have a strong theory background. And when people wrote the music, they were not thinking about people in the USA singing the music, people across the seas singing the music. So so for composers in other parts of the world, it's very important that they work on their music theory, so that they can try and interpret their music the best way, so that it doesn't lose authenticity. So music theory is very, very important.
May I add on to that?
Yeah, please do.
Because I understand what Mbuso is saying in certain ways, that as a composer, and then sometimes as a director, you really need to feel it. Because sometimes Western notation is, you look at it and it's like, I don't get that. But if you can go and feel it in yourself, and find other ways to help teach that to other people, because sometimes notation, even though it's right there and it's totally perfect, they just don't get that. Yeah. Sometimes you even have to explain it in the music. Here's how to teach this.
Right. I totally get that. I often tell the story of directing. I used to direct a gospel choir at the University of Rochester, and we did most things without a score. And we were collaborating with another choir who was using a score for a piece, and they got the score, and gone were any notions of style, of any notions of, and I was like, oh yeah, you guys, this is what we do. What is happening? So we had to kind of relearn how to feel the music even from the printed page, kind of lift the music up from the page and bring our own meaning to it. So there's a question that's come in. Thanks, folks, for submitting your questions. Keep them coming. And I'll just read it verbatim because I think it's wonderful. Do you think that people are born with an aptitude for writing music, or is this a learned skill? If you don't feel like you're a particularly creative person, can this skill still be developed? Tom, I'm gonna go.
I'm gonna say yes, because my day job is teaching people that they actually can be creative and they can develop creative skills. I know it because I see people struggle with it. I'm not teaching them music, but I'm teaching them to unlock their creativity. I would say more important than that is having the desire to do it. So if that's something you want to do and you have a passion for it, then yes, then you'll find ways to do it. You'll find somebody to take a lesson. To teach. If you're inspired by music and you think you have a voice and you want to share it, then yeah, we can teach you.
Oh yeah,
for sure. Steve, what would you say about that?
I would say the same thing Tom said. If you have a desire to learn anything, you can learn it, but you have to have the desire, you have to have the drive, and you have to be able to stick to it. Because I know a lot of people who say, I want to learn piano, and then they start realizing, oh, I have to practice. Oh, just that word right there, just, and I used to teach piano students, and I could tell when they didn't practice. And so that, after, 4 or 5 lessons, I'd be like, do you really want to learn this? Do you have a drive? Do you have a passion for this? And be honest with me, and more, than that, be honest with yourself. Mm-hmm. And it's okay if you don't have that passion or that drive there. You may have a passion or drive for something else. But I do believe if you do have that passion and that drive for music, that yes, you can learn to play, you can learn to write, you can learn to arrange.
Cool. And Mbuso?
I absolutely agree with Steve and Tom. You can learn to compose and arrange. And also you need to be patient with yourself. Your first composition is is not going to be beautiful at all. And just to share a story, I also used to marvel at great songwriters and great composers, and it has always been that desire. And I can say, similar to Steve's story, I sort of stumbled to it because at some point I was not intentionally or deliberately working hard on being a composer. But like I say, it takes time. It takes time. Be patient with yourself. And if you want to, if it's something that you really want to do, then go for it. Go for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm always amazed at how I think people are creative to survive. When you really think about all the times that you've kind of made something happen and you didn't know how it was going to happen, or you've kind of taken a paper clip and peanut butter and figured your way out of some random situation. Exactly. So and we do that so much more than I think we as a general population give ourselves credit for. And it seems like the same skills would apply to composing.
Yes.
And arranging. Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, and part of it really, it's not what a beginning composer would do, but part of it is finding your voice. I'm not gonna write like Steve, and I'm not gonna write like Mbuso, and learning what it is about you. So if you played all my compositions, one next to another, you'd start to understand, I think. So we all probably have a music, if we're not doing an arrangement, but even an arrangement, you'll still pick up, bits of what I would call our musical vocabulary, right? The way we like to state things. And I'm going back to a comment Steve made. It's like, oh, I don't want to do that same chord progression again, right? So part of it's a battle with ourselves and saying, do I really want to say it that way? Or am I just relying on the way I used to say it? And is there a better way to say it now? I'm struck that that's an innovation tool, right? So the comfortable way is to do what we know. The innovative way is to think about what's a new way that I could say this that might be more important for the people that I'm composing this thing for.
Awesome, cool. We also have this conversation, I'm loving it because, but with the first question, we had already covered 3 of the questions that I had to answer, which is wonderful. It's so organic. And there's a question that just came in from our online audience that says, how do you go from finished piece to getting it published? Steve, why don't you tackle that one first?
Okay. So I have various publishers. The Bayard Rustin piece is self-published. So people actually have to contact me to get the music to that. With Oxford, they came to me and my friend Charlie Beale with an idea. And so we said, these are the songs we want to put in the book. And they said, some are available, some are not. So can you find alternatives? And that's how that came about. And there is a wonderful thing out there now called SMP Press that is by Sheet Music Plus, if you ever use them to buy your music. And you can self-publish your music there without going through anybody, just putting it up. Now, if it's an original piece, they will pay you 45%. If it's an arrangement, you'll get of one of their pre-listed songs that says you can arrange, it's 10%. But as far as knocking on the different publisher doors, if you write an original piece, say a setting of an old hymn, and depending on the style that you set it in, go and listen to what certain publishers are putting out there. So you may want to send it to Beckenhorst Press, but not to Word. You basically just kind of put together one or three pieces, figure out the right publisher for these pieces, and you send it to them. And their publishers are more interested in originals right now than arrangements, because they want to see who you are.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Tom or Muso, do you have anything to add?
They also test your piece. Sometimes a piece may sound good on Sibelius up until a choir actually sings your piece or a band actually plays your piece.
Mm-hmm.
So so as part of the process, test your piece. Make sure that it sounds like an actual song.
Yes.
If I can use that. Yeah. Okay.
Great.
I want to bounce off of that really quick. Just a note for, as Mbuso said about singing harmonies. And once you write the parts, if you cannot sing them, and I'm not talking about range wise, but if you're writing something that goes, which some composers do, I'm not saying they don't. But if it is not singable, it is probably not publishable. Or it's probably, choirs are not going to be able to do it well. So consider that, and I will shut up.
I add an amen to that.
Right.
In my conservatory days, Steve, we sang some of that music, or
Yes.
attempted to sing some of that music, and wow. Yeah, and quite honestly, when I write music, I'm really not, so for me, who's not doing music full time now, it's really a creative outlet for me, and I'm not really looking to make it published. I'm happy that one piece is. I'm sure I'll submit more. For me, it's really a creative outlet. It's a thing that I love to do. For my church choir, I've been there for over 20 years. We have this really great relationship. I know the voices in my choir, so it's I know what I can and what I can't write. And so, it's, enough said.
Yeah, and so I have to say, from one church musician to another, please put your stuff out there, because trying to find stuff to fit the liturgical year, I would. You know exactly what I'm saying.
I hear you. I have that old green book that has like the choral pieces for every piece of scripture, and it's not.
Yeah, agreed. So this is a great question that just came in. What does it feel like to have someone else perform your piece? How does that feel, Mbuso?
Nothing but honor and privilege. to me, it's a humbling experience. Whenever I'm forwarded a video or I'm tagged in a performance, or could be a live performance of a choir performing my song, it's always humbling to know that there are conductors and actually directors that appreciate your music. Because it's one thing when your music is appreciated by the choir, but it's another when it's the directors, because they have the ears to dissect and discern what is good and what still needs some work. But for me, it's such a humbling experience.
Great. And Tom?
You know, I'm going to speak to that from the other end, from the conducting end. So when I'm conducting a piece and I know that the composer is going to be there, or that the composer's in the audience, it's almost like the circle's being completed, right? So it's coming home to roost. So it is the complete circle. Here's the person that wrote the notes for the choir to sing, for the audience to listen to, and now the composer's part of the audience. And I wonder, what's the old game, the telephone game that you used to play, where you'd whisper into somebody's ear and then they'd whisper it, and you'd go around the circle, and you hope like
telephone.
Telephone. You hope like heck that what the composer's hearing is what he or she originally intended. That's been really rewarding. I got to do some Alice Parker music with Alice Parker in the room, and it was just one of the highlights of my conducting career to have her there, and just have her talk to my students about that, and be affirmed that the musical decisions I made were the ones that she were thinking about. So I think about it from that end.
Cool. And Steve?
Oh boy, yay! I get to play devil's advocate. I always tell people that my arrangements and my compositions are my children, and sometimes they come back as Rhodes Scholars, and sometimes they don't. And because when you write something for somebody who is, say, 200, 300 miles away, and you're checking and saying, is everything okay? Is this piece working for you? Is there anything I need to change? And they say, no, it's good. It's going to be wonderful. We hope to see you in the audience. And then you sit in the audience, and there are times when you're like, oh my God, that was wonderful. Thank you. And this is actually being serious. And then there are times when you say, well, that was a performance. So, and you never, it's like life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. So I just, as composers, please be prepared for that. So
yeah, it is interesting. You don't know how it's going to come back to you.
Yeah.
And like kind of going off what Tom was saying, when you're the conductor, it's also, it's exciting. It's also nerve-wracking because you hope that it matches. Or if it doesn't match, you hope that the composer will be like, oh, I never thought of it that way, but now I will. There's another question coming in from our audience, and it says, what are some themes or messages that you want to convey for the immediate future? What will your compositions focus on? What do you want to put out into the world for now, I guess?
Hope. For one, unity. Seeing each other's differences and yet respecting the fact that we're all the same.
Yeah, it's such a challenging time. There's so many different things that are coming down on us right now, and I love that message of hope and unity. And I think critical to what we are as composers, listening is so important. It's as important as writing, and I think we can all learn to be better listeners.
Yes.
I couldn't agree more with Tom and Steve. Can I add something? In Africa, indigenous Africa, not the Africa that we have today, but musicians were the voice of the people. They could even write songs that were sort of disapproving of leadership, like they would take on leadership. So musicians are supposed to be the voice of the people. So if musicians or composers don't write music that speaks of the plight of the people, don't expose all the rot which is in society, then I don't think there's a future for humanity, because we have the tools to make something that is so serious just to get into people's ears, and then they can later digest and think, oh wow, actually we need to think about this, we need to think about it. So as composers, just adding on what Steve and Tom said, that we need to connect and listen and then be the voice of the voiceless.
Yes, I think that's so powerful. You know, as a conductor, and as, you know, someone whose job it is to curate programs, you know, I'm always thinking about that, right? You know, when the audience leaves, how do I want them to have changed? Because they're gonna change. they're gonna come in excited and leave bored, or they're gonna come in excited and leave energized, or there's gonna be a change there. And what transformation do I want to kind of engender? And I think that really a lot of that work starts with you all, the composers, who are saying, what can I put out into the world? You know, if that were not the case, I think choosing a concert program would be a lot easier, right? Because you would just say, whatever, put these things together. This is what'll sound good, go. Instead, we really have to think about that. And so as a conductor, as a programmer, as an artistic director, I'm very thankful to composers who do the work of speaking for the people, listening to the people, and then speaking to the people. I'm also very grateful to the three of you for this conversation. It's been wonderful. It's been, you know, to sound kind of new agey, hokey, it's been like healing also, which is a thing that has to happen, I think.
I got to get my crystals. Hold on.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. It has been, you know, it's been wonderful to speak with all of you. Thank you, Katie, who's been kind of managing our questions. And there's one more question that we wanted to save to the very end, because it has nothing to do with composing. It's Nguso, you are wearing winter clothing. Could you please tell us the temperature where you are?
Actually, it's not that bad. I think it's 5 degrees Celsius. Our winters are not that horrific like your winters. I think it's 5, but it's nothing negative, nothing below 0.
Got it.
Yeah, I think 5%.
Cool.
Sorry, 5 degrees Celsius. Sorry, 5 degrees Celsius.
So for us, that's like, you know, above freezing. Not awful. Great. So thank you for us Fahrenheit folks. Someone just shared this. This is one of our singers who said, my mom is from a country nearby to Nigeria, and she grew up singing in their choir. That is part of what inspires this singer of ours in the Boychoir. That's part of what inspires him as a musician. So I guess maybe that's one way to end. What does inspire you as a composer, as a musician, as a conductor, as a producer, as all the things that you are? What is the thing that inspires you, Steve?
I mean, music inspires me, period, because there is so many different types and styles. I mean, I'm going to help me, because I know I'm going to mispronounce some names right now. Some of my favorite composers: Sven David Sandstrom, Nude Nice, whatever. Yeah. You know, these are composers that just floor me every time I hear one of their pieces. And these pieces are so different from mine. But, you know, I can go from listening to that to go and also listen to the Isley Brothers, and then go and listen to, of all people, Miley Cyrus and Lady Gaga. I mean, there is just so many different types of music out there. I mean, and that's what inspires me, is just to peel back the layers and find out what's the new stuff today, what's music I don't even know of. Yeah.
Awesome. And if you go to a Cincinnati men's chorus concert, you will be inspired by all of that. Plus, it's a really wonderful experience. I love it. Tom, what inspires you as a musician?
You know, lots of things do. A really great tune, regardless of its provenance, inspires me. You know, one of my favorite albums is Linda Ronstadt's Canciones de mi Padre. She has a background, and just, you know, if you know her regular literature, it's just nothing like that. It's just this soulful, and every single song on that album is amazing. I'm inspired by great tunes. I'm inspired by great words. You know, I'm a voracious reader, and just sometimes a sentence will stop me cold. And I'm inspired by people who care.
Powerful.
It's so powerful. See, healing, I was not joking. Mbuso.
Oh, okay. Such a difficult question. I'm inspired by beauty. Yeah. Beautiful melody, beautiful harmony, beautiful people. But most importantly, I'm inspired by what's happening around me. Because I try every now and then to live in the moment and then be in the moment, so that if there are voices, as Tom earlier said, if there are voices, then I must be able to connect with those voices. Yeah, but I'm inspired by a lot of things. You can enjoy a great meal and feel like writing a song about it. So yeah, it's just to be open to what the now presents at that moment. Yeah.
Great. Well, again, thank you, Steve and Tom and Mbuso. It's been wonderful to chat with you, and thanks for joining our boy choir community in this way. And thank you for watching. We invite you to watch the next Boy Choir Banter. This is about studying music in college. I'm sure that there are some folks out there in the boy choir community who are thinking about that. So we'll have a few guests come chat about what that's all about. In a few different contexts, including a boy choir alum, Chancellor Way, who is now studying music at Xavier University. Connections, right? Okay. Thank you all, and have a great night.
Thank you.
Thanks.